delighted to see so many people here this afternoon, because this is a very, very special day in the life of Friends of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. It is our 20th anniversary. And yes, and about 20, maybe 21 years ago, this is how it happened. The Institute of Noetic Sciences board was having a meeting in England, and they were traveling around, looking at Stonehenge and standing stones and I don't know what mysteries of the world. And they were on a bus, and 3 of the New York board members at the time got together in a little huddle in the bus and said, you know what, there's so much interesting stuff going on in the world. I think we ought to get people together in New York and talk about it and bring in some of these fascinating researchers and scientists and learn what it is that's happening. And so they said, oh, what a good idea. And they did. They came back to New York and they brought together some of their friends, and you're here as a result. And so we want to honor those 3 stalwart founders. And we have one of them here today, Payne Middleton. And we're very, very grateful to you, Payne. We have Emery. Emery has some token of our thanks, and she's bringing them up now, and we're going to pass them along. She's right here in the 3rd row. I don't know that you're going to get her to get up. She doesn't want to get up. You can get the flowers to her. And now Charlie Brush, who was one of the other founders, left us about 3 years ago, so we know he's with us in spirit. He's a great explorer himself. And our 3rd founder, unfortunately, isn't able to be with us today in person, but here we go. Here's Payne. There we go. We want to thank you, and we're hooking Sandy, who's in Washington. Unfortunately, she can't be with us, but she's going to be on a speakerphone just simply to say hi and connect in with you, because she's been. If it weren't for these 2 ladies and Charlie, none of this would have happened. And there are now about almost 300 community groups, local groups from FIONS meeting all over the world. Sandy? Okay. Are you there? Okay. She can hear us. I don't think we can hear her. But Sandy, we've got a room full of 300 people here just waiting to hear about what's happening cutting edge today, to hear from Colin Andrews and to hear from Edgar Mitchell about the latest in space and the latest from planet Earth. And so we only wish you could be with us, but you're here in spirit. Speakerphone doesn't seem to be working. Okay, Sandy, it's not any louder, no. Well, we don't have a very efficient speakerphone. We can get to the moon and we can do all kinds of things, but we can't seem to get speakerphones to work here in New York. We're somewhat challenged. Anyway, we are delighted to hear, I can hear your voice, and I think you can probably hear a room full of people here, or sense a room full of people here. And we are very, very, very grateful to you over the years for the support that you've given to the Institute and to Friends of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So we're going to have a rich, rich afternoon, and we just wanted to bring you in. Yes, I can hear you. It's an ongoing thing, right? It's been going for 20 years thanks to many, many people. Okay. Blessings to you, and we spend much, much love. Okay.
Years ago, I never would have thought I'd be standing in front of a group this size, and I think it's absolutely terrific what the group has done. So, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I just want to draw to our attention that we have here some special guests. We have 38 members, students from the Aviation High School in Queens who are science students, and they've come here especially to hear our two special guests. And we're going to be able to ask questions later on because they are really up on or want to know more about what's happening in inner space and outer space. So we welcome them, and we're delighted that they're here. The students of any community are one of the great assets, of course, and particularly when you come to noetics and the topics that we're interested in. So, where is Alan? We're going to move on to our program, and we have to introduce our first speaker. We have Alan Steinfeld, who is one of our board members.
Thank you. Thank you. This is exciting because noetic science is the science of consciousness. And when Edgar Mitchell, who's here, thank you, Edgar, had the vision to start an institute of studying consciousness from a scientific perspective, it opened the door for all the things that people have shoved aside to really look at this phenomenon. What is consciousness? And there's been studies with IONS and now with FIONS in New York that are really validating what consciousness is and who we are as spiritual beings. So that inspired me and my company called New Realities. And thank you. And actually, today's event is being streamed live on newrealities.com. But it's all these ideas of new realities, and this quote by Rilke, the German poet Rilke, who said, "We must accept our reality as vastly as we possibly can. Even the unprecedented must be possible within it. This is, in the end, the only courage that is required of us, the courage to face the strangest, most unusual, and most explicable experience that we can meet." So that experience really is this crop circle phenomenon. And this is one of the most mysterious, unknown, unsolvable things happening on the planet. I think this should be first page news, front page news, because I was there. I wasn't skeptical. I was open, but there is something happening, mostly in Wiltshire, England, that is unexplainable. And noetic science, the science of consciousness, is very much interfaced with that. And the whole study of UFOs we might get into a little bit. And are these messages, are we alone in the universe, or are we really getting conscious contact from a higher civilization? That is probably the ultimate question that humanity can face. And the professor Christopher Rose at Rutgers says, finding evidence that we are not alone is likely the most important discovery of civilization. Our initial contact with these civilizations most likely will occur in a sort of message in a bottle. Messages that have maybe already landed. We might literally be standing on them. Messages won't arrive in a language or radio transmission, but messages of a physical type might be waiting for us now in our own backyard. I think that was a professor of astronomy, and he didn't really know about the crop circle phenomenon. So today we have a really exciting guest who's really investigated that. And this is not about belief. This is about evidence and evidence of consciousness. So I'll leave you with one more quote by Margaret Mead when she was asked if UFOs exist and whether she believes in UFOs. And she said, "Belief has nothing to do with knowledge that is based on scientific inquiry. We should not bracket UFOs with angels and gods and devils and demons, but it is just what we do when we ask people whether they believe in UFOs, as if their existence was an article of faith. Do people believe in the sun and the moon, or the changing seasons, or the chairs they're sitting on? When we want to understand something strange, something previously unknown to anyone, we have to begin with an entirely different set of questions. First, what is it? How does it work? Are there recurrent regularities? And beginning in this way, with an open mind, people can take a hard look at all the evidence and make a new idea about the way reality is. So with that, one of the most brilliant people who have been studying the phenomena and framing it in terms of consciousness and science is today's first speaker, Colin Andrews. Thank you, Colin.
Well, obviously, I thank FIONS very much for this opportunity to stand in front of you today and to basically be the tool, the machine that pulls me back out into the public domain somewhat. I've been obviously involved with the research. I've done a lot of public speaking for 26 years on this subject. That's good. But for 4 years now, I've taken very much of a back seat. Thank you. So please excuse the kind of edges perhaps on my presentation. It's 4 years away from this. So to thank FIONS very much, and to thank particularly three, if I may just pull out, that have helped very much in pulling this together for me. As Phobal Chang, I believe at the back, Alan Steinfeld, who actually presented me here today and whose program I very much enjoyed participating in earlier in the week on the radio. And of course, Richard Schiffman, who has been very much my man into here. And of course, not for me to miss this unique opportunity in being plugged in to the research and to identifying the people who have stepped forward in the lead-in to what is now going on out there in our world. Things, as we all know, are changing. And no person, I think, I would like to publicly say thank you to, is Edgar Mitchell, who, thank you. I don't know about you, but if you've sat back and imagined giving yourself over to the technology of the day in the hands of so many engineers to take you up onto that little ball in the sky and back, takes tremendous courage. And thank you very much for that, Edgar, and for what you've done since. He has, we were talking about this just a short time ago, of course taken the wrath of being prepared to talk about consciousness, talk of the possibility of the UFO and so on, something that was absolutely necessary to do. Somebody had to open that door, and now the door is well and truly, I think, open. It's for all of us to come forward and seize this moment. This is a special time. I'd like to spend the next 45 minutes showing some evidence of the most bizarre things that I've experienced at first hand in many cases in the last 26 years. The title, Conscious Circles, which of course is where I'm going to focus right in. The next slide I'd like just to spend just a few seconds. It deserves much more. My friend, colleague, a wonderful human being, who's actually very ill at this very moment in time in a hospital in Winchester, England, Pat Delgado, who is the co-author of my first book, the first book ever written on the subject, in 1989. Pat Delgado, an engineer, electromechanical design engineer, next slide please, who I'd like to dedicate this presentation to. Next slide please. Pat was working behind the scenes, one of those many folk behind the scenes for the kind of project that Edgar was involved in. Here he is, this is his involvement in the Mariner project at Woomera, the deep space facility that NASA have in Australia, tracking these projects. There is a real possibility that I might challenge the believability threshold. This is a new place for me in a presentation today, and hence to subject what inevitably will be a credibility test. I know this is streaming worldwide on the internet today. It would be remiss of me to comply with a social conditioning for what is acceptable or not. The UFO topic has been subject to this for far too long. 60 years, too long. It works, and the government know it. But times are changing. If we continue to comply and subdue the very material that is waiting to be understood, it's highly likely our spiritual progress will be impaired. We have to take this moment and change this nonsense. It is our responsibility to do so. And I would just kind of try and pin that to the floor without naming any political party, any particular country, but simply to say, no government has the right to place conditions on the advancement of human consciousness and where it must lead. If we hold that slide for a while, yeah, can we just go back there a little bit? This photograph was taken by the Ministry of Defense. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this next week in the X conference in Washington. Edgar and myself and many other speakers will be there. This will be very much looking at what the governments are doing now with the release of secret documents related to the UFO. Well, this one was taken, denied at the time, as any involvement by the British government, taken by the MOD in Great Britain. From the very beginning, as far as I was concerned, Pat Delgado was concerned, Busty Taylor, and the meteorologist Dr. Terence Meaton, looking as a small team into these features near Stonehenge, appearing right back there in the early 80s. Right from the beginning, there was a kind of UFO flavor to what it was we were looking at. And this is why. Next one, please. In fact, I'm sorry about this, but I actually can't read. Can you read the detail here? Or can you see the detail?
It says, you want to read the whole thing?
Yeah, well, no, we don't need to read it all. I know pretty well what's here. Let me just say this. I wanted you kind of to come with me on this, if I may. The third word in the first official document I was able to get my hands on, and incidentally, the British government, I take some risks with this, but we've got some things, some business to do, and now's the time to do it. So the British government have said they are releasing UFO documents. I'm sure you know that. Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. And the batches are coming out. Well, related to this particular incident in 1985, those documents are out. Strangely, this particular document in its fullness, as I've got in front of you tonight, is not in the public domain. The third word in the first official document is UFO. Now, this was this is written by the Lieutenant Colonel Edgecombe, the Army Air Corps at Middle Wallop, who prepared this for the MOD in London, saying he's questioning here right from the outset. He was in the helicopter over this field with the accident investigation people, the major that also taken with him, questioning, is this UFO? Well, he goes on down here, if you could read this. He's going on to say something extraordinary. We're looking at this from the sky. They took those photographs that you saw there. There's no way that people, if they made this, could enter particular features of that cross that you saw there, 5 circles forming a cross. Some of the satellites were in remote areas where you couldn't gain access to it without leaving tracks. They were hovering their aircraft over the top of this without seeing the evidence for that. Now, what I'm saying, please measure, as any skeptic would and should, to the question, but could people have made them? We're going to get down to this in fine detail as we run through the next short while. It just says it there.
It says none of us could offer any reasonable explanation.
Right. There's the first document. So here they are saying the military themselves can't see how that got there. Is it UFO? Next one, please. That's not what you were told several weeks ago when the first batch of documents were released. And here already, we're only minutes in, I have some concern, and again, we'll be expressing this in more detail next week, but we can share this now. I have some concern that this new era of honesty, of openness, we have to be sure that this is not phase 2 of phase 1 dressed up. This has got to be honest. It's the only way. We do not have time any longer on this planet to beat around the bush with the lies, the deception, and all the nonsense that got us here. So the next one, please. Well, over the hill. Now this is only 2 miles over the hill, the other side of the ramp, the hillside, where you just saw that photograph was taken from. I was the communications major civil emergency officer for the region of Test Valley Borough Council in central southern England at the time this happened. I used to spend my life with radio frequencies all around me and heard the moment when this elderly, these senior citizens here, were traveling along the highway south of my position. Coincidence or not, I would seem it was intended to hear it, because I hear the police control calling out 2 police vehicles to head immediately to this place where these senior citizens have actually put in what it would be here a 911 call, 999 in England, very distressed. They have seen a Ferris wheel with numerous lights stood on its end, completely stationary, hanging in the sky. 6th of July, this was 6th of July, 1985. Next slide, please. Now, so what do we have? We don't know for sure when that set of 5 circles that you first saw, that the Ministry of Defence investigated, we don't know when it appears. We know they were found on the 31st of July. 6th of July, 2 miles down this particular alignment, the elderly people see UFO, can't account for it. The geometry that they drew in their reconstruction of events in the sky resembled broadly the design in the field. The same night, down here just a few miles away, a further set, almost identical. So we had reason, I believe, as fair-minded, reasonable, open-minded investigators to believe the UFO might be in the equation. Next one, please. Right, so if you could just hold this slide for a short time, please. Around the crop circle mystery, over all of these years, there have been numerous reports of strange orbs varying in size, UFOs varying in description, flashes of light. I've witnessed these myself. I was with my mum and dad and the dog measuring one circle when my mum and dad wanted to come out and look at them. Broad daylight, in the middle of the countryside, not a cloud in the sky. It's a sudden crackle in the field, like an electrostatic discharge. We all looked up, the dog jumped back. Out of nowhere, simply this flash of light that many people have seen. And the more bizarre, where this will stretch credibility factor. But as I said, I think the time has come to do this. There are people, and I am one of them, who have had experiences where in private I have prayed for a particular design to appear in a particular place. It's 2 conditions, not set out that way, but simply put out there in that way, and both have been accommodated. That is, the design and the place. And this comes, I can tell you, I'm stood in front of you, and you need not believe me. I will be here in next month saying the same thing, because that's what happened. And whilst I stood alone at the time I first started to describe this, many people are now stepping forward with the same description. A television program just gone out from Britain a few days ago from Sky Television, satellite Sky network, talking now this is where we have to broaden our thinking. The people who are making some crop circles, same experiences. And they came forward. There is a confession on for anybody well into this, on the Circle Makers website in London right now, confessing to the fact that these people are getting all of these experiences. And so just where is this coming from? We need to take this one step further. So really and truly, obviously, at this point, we're saying, so with all of these, this whole range of bizarre anomalies, what is the common link? What's going on here? Where does it fit into consciousness of what we think, what we perceive, what we think, what we believe, where we want to go, what we deny, what we're skeptical about, and what do we want to destroy? All of those elements feed into who we are as people, as a species, what we are here to do. And so we have to take a broad look at this, a broad range look at what consciousness itself is. And of course, there are many ideas about what consciousness actually is. I think just to add for a moment, we've got a lot of material, I've got a lot of material coming here. I think this huge experiment, this is worth noting, a huge experiment currently employing the Hadron Collider in Geneva, with over 10,000 scientists currently looking at this exciting experiment where they're actually going to accelerate protons to near the speed of light and collide them. They're looking for what they believe, the theoretical scientists certainly strongly believe, will be what they call the God particle. This is a multi-billion-dollar operation, experiment, currently underway, involving many, many countries. If this comes off, and they discover the God particle, which they believe will then, of course, show and prove that there is a particle that they feel is responsible for the transmission, that function of transmission between energy and matter. Exciting experiment where they're actually going to accelerate protons to near the speed of light and collide them. They're looking for what they believe, the theoretical scientists certainly strongly believe, will be what they call the God particle. This is a multi-billion-dollar operation, experiment, currently underway, involving many, many countries. If this comes off, and they discover the God particle, which they believe will then, of course, show and prove that there is a particle that they feel is responsible for the transmission, that function of transmission between energy and matter. And that particle, in its full construct and application, will then break that barrier that we've been so locked into, the speed of light governing all things, and that thought itself is instantaneous across space and distance, that whatever you think is the connect with all that life is, wherever it is. So there's some very exciting things going on right now that science itself is tapped right into. In 1982, physicists were amazed as a single atom in Europe simultaneously changed the position in response to a similar change in its sister atom in America. At that moment, crazy theories that were developed from quantum physics became real. Theories such as thought contains a force that impacts matter, and space, distance, time don't limit physical connection. In fact, everything science told us about the nature of reality and our own abilities changed as we slowly come to terms with this paradigm shift The world of the mystic becomes the new world of science. Haven't we been going through an awful lot to get this far? Fascination in consciousness seems to have erupted overnight. People are embracing the extraordinary insights into the limitless nature of reality and the innovative future being foretold. Mystics have long proclaimed the importance of expanding one's consciousness. Prophecy and religion have foretold of a new golden age of higher awareness. As science has evolved into the quantum era, the reality described by the mystics no longer seems impossibly fanciful. It is said that consciousness is the new frontier. This comes from a book that Cynthia, my wife, is currently working on. And I think this really does nail it. Like the concept of chi, it defies simple definition. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as self-awareness. That's very important. Other definitions include consciousness as the totality of experience at any given instant, as the energy of awareness and intelligence, and as the animating and directing principle of the universe. For us, these definitions, as for Cynthia and I in the work we're now involved in, actually falls short. This is what we personally believe. If we are spiritual beings having a human experience, then consciousness is our vehicle for that journey. Every idea, every thought, every belief we embrace, real or not, contributes towards the growth of our vehicle. If we are expanding our awareness to perceive with greater parts of ourselves, then consciousness is the perceptive tool we are developing. If we are learning to co-create the universe, then consciousness is the force we are learning to use. This is so important. Consciousness is the part of us that connects us to all that is, that harmonizes the natural rhythms larger than we currently perceive, and that evolves us from a vessel of infinite potential to one of spiritual self-realization. The exploration of consciousness is the ultimate journey. With our future and our emotional and spiritual health so interwoven with the knowledge we have obtained and the environment in which we live. In the year 1999 and 2000, you might have seen on television, it was fairly widely covered, certainly in Europe, that I announced the outcome of 2 years of investigation, much of it undercover, into the work of people making crop circles. In that 2-year period, of all the crop circles reported in England, 20% were discovered to have a totally inexplicable conclusion. There were no signs we could find with police detectives, underground, but nonetheless, police detectives who have put people in prison for life. These are people we have lived to trust, saying we can't find any evidence of anybody making these designs. It's 20%. It did, however, come as a shock to many people, including myself, that 80% were indeed made by people. But that was only the beginning of the mystery. It was not the end. Next one, please. This is Busty Taylor, a light aircraft pilot who is a friend and a researcher. We were over this field on the 24th of August, 1986. Busty looked at me, simply one of those momentary conversations, and said, Colin, wouldn't it be something to see all of the circles that we have seen to date overlaid as one intricate design? That was a statement, a comment. Now let me just hold it there for a moment. These are the circles that we had seen to date. These repeated many times. This is the Ministry of Defense photograph, of which there were many of this quintuplet set. That's a 1985 photograph, I think, there. We had these appear. This is 1981, circles in a straight line. Farmers have been finding single circles, double circles of half the size, but this one being 3 in a straight line. Here's one of the simple circles. This was 86. And this was the very first of a series with singular angular rings across central southern England that appeared in a matter of days. This repeats time and time again. We had this conversation on Alan's program earlier in the week. This happens time and time again, and it's easily thrown away. That's the problem. If we don't like what we see and we hear, or it's a little bit too much, it gets done. We are living in comfortability zone, and now's the time to move it over a niche. Unless we share these things, unless we feel safe enough to share these experiences, we will not grow. So, next day, that's the next one, Alan. Right here, and where the aircraft was, that's the point. We flew central southern England several days a week, looking surveillance aircraft for these designs. Not just anywhere, but where this was the day before, this is only 200 or 300 yards away, is exactly what he had basically challenged. He didn't make that. I didn't make that. And what it is everything we had ever seen before overlaid into a design. It's no different from having the dream, which I have had myself, you'll see. It wasn't a dream, it was a prayer for a design to appear, and it appeared. It's like we are part of the process. Next one, please. Sound. Well, it'll be in a second, Alan. This was the first time I personally heard a sound which everybody that knows me well in my family, certainly who are watching in England right now, they know that I would not let this go. Every day I would say what I heard next to this ring this day was so powerful, it profoundly touched me, and this is how it went. I stood here alone. You've only my word for it at the moment. I stood out here. We had already visited this site. An aircraft pilot picked it up. We attended. We did work. We went home. I went back because I'd missed a certain measurement I wanted. I went back alone. Sun was setting near Stonehenge, over the top of the hill, and I stood there quietly meditating. I had done what I came to do. It was a beautiful evening, and I just connected in with the ground, and I said, please God, in my head, please God, give me a clue. It was simply it. And like you never expect to get an answer, I got something. And it frightened the life out of me. I heard this sound, which Alan this was not recorded at the time. No, actually, if you could just hold off on that, Alan, I want to kind of make another point. I wasn't equipped to record it. I didn't have the equipment with me. But I know what I heard. It was so different from anything I had heard. It was an electrostatic crackling sound, like a sparrow chatter, but it had a metallic edge to it. I've never forgot it. And it got so loud that the air was moving around me. And I was looking to the fastest way out of the field. I mean, I have to tell you, my disposition changed from peaceful meditation to how do I get out of here? That's how I felt. So, right, now just remember, that was the first time a very unusual sound was heard. Next one, please. And the circumstances was, I was praying. I don't always feel comfortable to say that. All kinds of connotations, but that's what happened. Next time. This is now 1988. Now, just hold there on. Well, the circle with a ring that you just saw, that was this. South of my town of Andover in Hampshire, central southern England. I lived right there. I was going through a very difficult situation at home, and I lay alone on the bed that night, and I visualized, much like Busty Taylor had said in that aircraft, in a casual throwaway comment, I checked in with myself, and I said, could this design be produced as close to my home as possible? And again, I was praying. I do not attend church. I just need to say this. I'm a person that does believe. I believe there's something out there. I believe there's a tremendous power and force out there. But I cannot quite settle it in my mind is the way that we've been given it to believe. And so I was speaking to a God. I'm sorry, I don't wish to offend anybody. I was speaking to a God, and perhaps some will say the God, but that's okay. That's what I was doing. And I said, this design is what I had in my mind, close to my home as possible. The next morning, that night, I had a phone call. Next one, please. From the farmer who owned this field here. Here it is. This was already there. We'd already investigated it. And he's saying to me, Colin, it's Jeff Smith, his name, from the farm here. We've got something else in the field. I said, what? He said, you've got 2 hours to sort it out. We're harvesting. Rain is coming. I got an aircraft, Busty Taylor, got the aircraft up, over the top. Now, two things. That not only was precisely what I asked for. You see this boundary? That's the closest field to my home that had cereal crop capable of capturing the designs that appear to need more than 12 inches or so of vegetation to affect itself. I did not make that. Busty Taylor did not make that. And I was in bed from the time I had my prayer to the phone call that came in. But you don't have to rely upon my word, because we're going to expand this out in just a few moments. That happened. I think just quickly to add, you see this feature for those who can, just here. This not only arrived in the field requested, it gave us information in the construction of this ring as if it were in fact a 2D recording of a multi-dimensional form. And I say that because the flow of the plants, the flattening effect, as you won't expect in a clockwise direction here, you'll see it here. The plants began to move in at an angle here and leave at an angle there, as if around the center of the bubble there was this kind of effect, if you can imagine that as a multi-dimensional sphere. When Doug and Dave claimed they made all the crop circles, you might remember, in 1990, I challenged them on this. I said, how did you make this circle at this place in 1988? And it's the only thing that was not in the newspaper that day, because what they said, and I had a whole room full of people, with the Today newspaper reporter who wrote it, they said, but not that one. They didn't make this one. Well, no, we kind of knew that, but here provided in this extraordinary thing that happened that night was the information we were able to come forward with to say, it's well beyond. It's well beyond the people that have been making some of them. Next one, please. Now, this really requires an entire afternoon. Obviously, it can't have it. A few weeks ago, I was instructed to remove a document that you would have been seeing the very next slide after this one. And I want to say something about that. This photograph was taken by the police aerial surveillance aircraft of Hampshire in central southern England. Again, photographs we are told by our government do not exist. This is just some of them. This photograph was taken because I was the guy that asked if they could attend, and that's me right there. But these photographs don't exist. One step further, some extraordinary things happened here in 1989, of which were mentioned in detail in a document from the highest levels of the British government. That document I intended and wanted to show you today was on my website, and it has been removed from this presentation and from my website, with the threat of legal action if I fail to do so. And there is no other reason than the nervousness that some of us have with our own experiences they have also within the ranks of the government. What you were going to see, and I'm afraid I cannot go into the detail of it, was specific reference to what happened to myself, Pat Delgado, and 9 other people this night. But I'm going to tell you what happened. Next one, please. These were the people present. We're looking at all kinds of professionals. IBM analyst here. This is our pilot. This is the meteorologist. This is obviously myself, Pat Delgado. There's a whole team here, and we have a medium and clairvoyant. This might be important. I've got to put it out there for what it ultimately turns out to be its worth. Here we have a well-known Rita Gold, her name is, for anyone who wants to do research on this. She is a British medium and clairvoyant. She's been studied by the Societies of Psychic Research for a number of years, materialization and odd things that happen around her. She was with us. What happened was this. The surveillance operation was intended to film in low-light image intensifier equipment a crop circle forming. We had a site which was a very prolific producer of crop circles. We set the equipment up. It went 9 days, and very little to show for it in front of the cameras. In the closing hours, this woman and George Wingfield over here, talking to myself in the control vehicle that we had there, suggested perhaps we take a walk up the hill and sit in that circle that the police took a photograph of, which was within a couple of 100 yards of where we were set up. So we sat down in the circle just after midnight, and some strange things began to happen. We were in a state of meditative conscious state, and this sound, which I had heard before once at Kimpton, which we've just referred to, I could hear it, and I'm looking at other people, other members of the group there, and I'm looking at them. Do they hear what I'm hearing? This sound, there's that sound again. Well, it started to come towards us. It became towards us, and we started to close in like, this sound knows we're here. It went around us in a stereophonic kind of fashion. The hairs are standing on my arm now, of course, I'm telling you. And it was the awareness that something, that sound, knows we're here. And it started to react and interact. The sound moved back to the edge of the circle down here. This is all in darkness, with our eyes only adjusting to starlight, a sky, which is actually remarkable how much you can see in a dark sky at night. But I need to say that. We're all looking at one another, wondering what on earth is going on, and then my man, my friend, who's watching in his hospital bed now, Pat Delgado, felt inside of his head, that's the way he describes it, something's telling him to go to the sound. And he did. We are all witness to this. Now that it's not just me that you're having to kind of wonder about. He went to this sound, and as he did so, he got to the sound, and he started to, I can't do it, or I'll fall over. That was the remarkable thing about it. He went back at an angle which was impossible. He went back at an angle, and I'm looking, thinking he's going to fall. And he was held there in suspension at that kind of angle, and the fear on his face as he was pulled back towards the sound, backwards towards the sound. He put his hand out to me like that. He said, "Colin," like this, and all the others are watching. We have all their statements. You might have seen it on the internet. With his hand out to me, I mean, I've never seen this man look so terrified. And I went to him, directly to him, and whatever force was involved pulled both of us back, me forwards and him back. I mean, like this, until I literally had to pull with all my power and my force to pull that man upright and pull him back to a position where we spoke about and then we left. Spoke about and we left. Each person gives their various account of this on the website that you can look at and check out. So it was the sound, it was the physical effect, it was the fact that I personally saw a light and fuzzy area in the field. That was all I visibly saw at any time. This went on, incidentally, the sound moving and interacting with what I've just said, for a period of 1.5 hours. We went back later, some hours later, and could still hear, out in the sky there somewhere, was the sound which I recorded. We recorded them. This is the first time it's been recorded. There are some more for you to hear. This is the sound. This is marked chest-foot head. Chest-foot head sound. The short burst. This is the sound. Now you're going to hear it slowed down 50%. Okay, we can, I think, yeah, that's fine. So, thank you. Next slide. So for the technically minded, there it is. Basically we're looking at 5.2 kilohertz in frequency. You'll see further down the road when I'm going to let you hear some more in other circumstances. We're really looking, I think we're looking at the best people in the business have told me we're looking at ultrasound. This is ultrasound at the frequency of the dolphins communicate at, and it's very, very close to US Navy submarine communications. Next one, please. Yeah, I should have said something before we got to this, but okay, it's all right, I can tell you. George Wingfield, during this 1.5 hours of an amazing experience, one that you'll never forget, he said, I remember hearing him say it, and he has put a statement on the website which the head of state in my country had with all the audio tapes, which is what you're not seeing tonight as a document. He said right out to the sound, can you make us a circle? I mean, it's crazy stuff to speak, in a public venue like this. This was over the hill, literally over the hill. It was discovered by the police aerial surveillance camera the very next day. This is it, and we're stood in it. Next one, please. This is on a hunch. I'm going to speed the delivery up now because I'm told that time is getting tight, and I know I've got a lot to tell you. So we're looking now on a hunch. This is Pat Delgado, just a few weeks ago, before his health deteriorated, decided to go back on recordings that he had made over the years and record the sound coming from the trees at Chesfoot Head. Now we're looking at the sound. This is how this has been arrived at. The microphone is removed from the end of the two wires. One probe is put into the tree, 1 meter up, the other one 1 meter at the ground level, and the recording is taken across the bottom of the trunk of the tree, as best I can describe it. This is the sound that the trees at Chesfoot Head are emanating. Okay, so next slide, please. So again, this is the analysis of that has been carried out by Win Keach. He's former IBM program analyst, engineer technology, Rolls-Royce, a man who knows his stuff, and he's showing us this is a very, very close match with the previous two. Okay, next one, please. BBC Television. I was doing an interview with Pat Delgado, July 1989. This hit the headlines in Great Britain. You may not have seen it here. We were doing a recording. The next one, please. These are the headlines just to show you that it was taken seriously. It always is if the media themselves are involved. That's fair enough. It is a story. But this is what happened. This is the moment. Pat Delgado is stood in the center of this circle. I'm stood next to, you can't see me, but I've already done my interview, and I'm stood next to the sound engineer. Television camera is over here. They're making a piece to put on to a documentary for BBC Television. And suddenly, the sound is there again. Now, this time, we've got everything in hand to record it. And we did. Not before. the BBC camera, thousands of dollars worth, was destroyed. But this is the sequence. Pat is saying here, I can feel it. It's all around me. The hairs are stood up on his head, on his arms, and I'm saying, Pat, that's our old friend. It's the sound. The BBC guy is recording and putting his headset back like this. Television camera is destroyed. We then are asked to the studio. This is a live situation now. This is recorded. This is the live situation. Here is the sound man. BBC Pebble Mill Studios in Birmingham, England. And this man is now being told, play the recording to the viewers as to what they heard. And at that moment, the power in the entire building was lost. Next one, please. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm kind of so with this that I'm eating the time. Here we go. That was the sound, and I think it's the same as the others. We don't need to play it. It is the same. There's the BBC. There's the undertone, 5.2 kilohertz, destroys the equipment. Next one, please. Right, very quickly. This was man-made, and I know the people who made it. This was for a blind test of the biology that was being conducted by a scientist here in America, and to see what other researchers made of it. This was the night it was put in, 6th of July, 1995, 10 p.m. The next day. Next one, please. Look what's happened. We have got two new arrivals forming an equilateral triangle with this base that these people put in, now cutting the center of this form here, forming that. Not a swirled circle, the chlorophyll has been removed from the plants. Next one, please. And this appeared right next door in the following film, the same night, and they didn't make this one. This too is referenced to a feature on the landscape, precisely. Next one, please. And that's how it came about. Man-made, with additions, second arrival appeared to be aware of the first event, and this appearing next day. Next one. It's nothing new for designs to be referenced to ground topography. This is just a few examples. This is the wash-off of the chemicals applied to the plants and how the positioning of the plant, the design itself, is having some accord with the ground topography. Next one, please. That was taken at about 10,000 feet. This is a Roman road, underground feature. Cannot be seen from ground level. It can be seen from aircraft and from space. It's an old Roman road. Cutting dead center again to the design. Next one, please. This will take more time than I can give it to you now, and it's full of, and I apologize. But this is in Branford, Connecticut, just up the road. I'm asleep with my wife, Cynthia. This particular night, something extraordinary happened. Like it's layer upon layer, you know, challenging believability beyond belief. In the middle of the night, we're both asleep. And I opened my eyes. I was just like suddenly some download of information. It is the placement of energy in that geometry, which is of importance. And what did I find was that when these alarms were going off in my home back in England, there was a film made about it at the time, the clocks stopped, that's battery-operated clocks, stopped at 4:15. The electrical network into the house stopped at 4:15 until it seemed that was until I recognized the fact that the designs formed along the same information, 4:15, 41.5 miles. Next one, please. Counties, you cut the bottom of the baseline again precisely, just like that extraordinary thing that appeared in the previous slide, cutting right through the center of Stonehenge back up to the apex. The next one, please. What happened was that as the information tailed off, and I can only describe it that way, I just kind of felt as if it was like turning the rheostat down, and it left me. It was gone. Whatever it was gone. And I looked over to my right, and Cynthia's eyes opened, and she filled out And she too got exactly the same information related to her particular profession and her knowledge. And it was about the human body and how important it was to communicate with a higher realm through the placement of your hands like this, the third eye and the heart chakra, forming the same equilateral triangle with this ratio here as that other unit. Here's Stonehenge, here's that event that appeared there. And the two, after a few moments, it left Cynthia too. And we're there looking at one another and making records as to what on earth had just happened. Next one, as I think we'll, I'm going to kind of cut through these. They're all very, very important, but we don't have the time to talk about them, other than I'd just say Tai Chi instructor, this guy, drew this design, intended to make it. Now we're looking at hoaxers, right? The guy intended to make it with his brother. His brother fell ill. He couldn't make it. He said, this is what we're going to make, and we're going to make it at Barbary Castle, one particular field. Next one, please. They didn't make it. His brother was ill. That appeared in the very field they intended that night. Next one, please. Okay, we could go on, but I think I'm going to cut through this. These are journalists that have had the same experiences who are now going public. And, of course, you know, I'm putting that out for them too. But I will just read this in closing. So have we been looking at evidence of a new phenomenon percolating into our physical world and our consciousness, which once embraced by us, will reconstruct our perception of reality and move us forward onto a new path. Manifestations of designs in the fields, lights in the sky, some seemingly initiated by the observer's thoughts themselves. Sounds which are so far unexplained have been heard in ambient surroundings without equipment, also picked up on radio waves with equipment. A sound which is a very close frequency match in all cases and is interacted with the observers. A very low level frequency which is within the band that nature uses to communicate with dolphins. Crop circle researchers, myself included, have asked for designs to appear in even defined locations and have had both conditions met. What grounds do we have for separating this whole gambit of phenomena in the fields with those in the skies? The many years of UFO research is finished up in a similar place with its own versions of the crop circle interactive experience in the sky. I believe the unexplained and seemingly impossible stretches well beyond these subjects and suggests that there is a life force connectivity, perhaps interspecies, interdimensional, and that evolves us all in the process. As we consolidate true humanity, true purpose with true respect and love for each other, we will be gifted and will then have earned the beginning of the real journey, where each new experience will noticeably lead to another. We are, though, currently involved in deepening struggle at a critical time to untangle ourselves, this is the process, from the webs of deception and greed, self-inflicted and installed upon us by numerous agendas over many years. We step cautiously forward through a hall of mirrors placed in front of us, which demands our discords be resolved and truths told, thus preparing us for a new foundation on which extraordinary positive change can and will take place. This is our time, with ultimate possibilities for our children to live in a world where love is the security, as opposed to bombs, the latter brought about by fear and outdated mindsets. Every new government should have a department of peace. In a social environment where we feel safe to express ourselves and be respected for so doing, our consciousness will prosper, expand. Science, along with all life on Earth, will never be the same again. We are laying the groundwork for a new beginning at a time which will greatly benefit by us standing shoulder to shoulder in that process. Thank you.
You want to take some questions? 10 minutes of questions? Okay. Here. Give me that mic. Okay, we have about 10 minutes just for questions. Does anyone have a very pressing question? Well, I'll ask one. Any ideas about who are these intelligences that are actually doing these? Any clue where they're from and who they are?
Thank you. I can only say that the sense that I get is this is some form of multidimensional, half us and half something else. It's impossible for me to nail it. We've not had enough experience with all of the processes underway, but I get a definite sense that we are ourselves part of the process. I don't personally think there may well be a number of species out there that are capable of doing physical things on their own accord for their own reasons. I personally get the sense that this phase one that's going on is partly us and is partly them. It's like our subconscious talking to our conscious, and that in between that gap somewhere is a connect with something else. There has to be something like that, because the fact that our thoughts are then played out in the fields, that there's a physical energy brought about to create what we are thinking. We are creating our own universe. That's the power of the human mind. And that's why we cannot allow at this critical time for any single person or any single government to take from the hands of the people where we have to go.
Colin, could you tell us what is the connection between these crop circles and UFOs?
Well, it's a great question, and it's the way I would answer it. Goodness me, I mean, it's certainly not a new one. We're living this every day in the fields and wondering what the connections are. I would have to say this, I think, that there are various phenomena which we will classify as UFO. There are orbs, these little orbs that appear to move and interact with the people. There are much larger structures that appear to be literally that, structures that are working with something else we've not yet put our fingers on. Perhaps we have, and we're not privy to that information. Something that allows it to be here one moment and there the next. An instantaneous, like the God particle that might be coming out of Geneva in the next couple of weeks, actually. I think they're turning it on again next week. So we're living in a time where I think we're going to get some answers, real answers, scientific answers to that question in the very, very near future. I think there are a number of governments that are with finger on pulse, wondering what's going to come out of the scientific exploration currently underway. You've got the UK that are going step by step with the release of documents. French have already gone. Belgians are going. US are holding back. My belief is that the US have got their hands on more technology than the rest. We have Roswell down the road here, of which Edgar is way more conversant than myself, that I think permitted the United States to gain access to extremely unique technology. So it's impossible for me, Mr. Outside of this system, to know the connection between UFO and the crop circles, but there is a connection, and there is as big a part of the human connection as there is the UFO connection. I think it's really time, I have to say, I think the reboot, the reset of this research must come under the heading of consciousness, which encapsulates all of those subjects, and to look at it fairly and in an open and honest and credible way, to bring scientists in. Once they have the God particle, as they're calling it, I think then with the credibility, we're going to be all aboard. And then we're all on the same ship. I think we're very close. We're very close.
Could you please expand a little bit? You said 20% of the crop circles are unexplained.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And 80% are man-made. Could you expand on that a little bit? And is there a connection between these man-made crop circles and the unexplained crop circles?
It's a great question. And I value the opportunity to speak to this because my psyche has been extraordinarily pressurized, put under pressure, by the statement that I made 10 years ago, that 80% were man-made. There is a CD, a DVD, available to anybody who wants to look at it in detail as to how that figure was arrived at, that what features we were able to isolate as different in man-made versus those that were not, those that had undercover people following with low-light cameras to record people making them and what they did, and the difference between what they did with these over here. There was a lot that went into pulling aside, separating man-made from the non-man-made. But this is, I think, the important question, if I may say this. It was going to be a slide which we ran out of time on giving you. I was a little bit too long on my delivery. This, I think, is the basic bottom line. I can tell it in a very brief story. A man who might be here, John McNish, if he's here, he might just raise his hand, from BBC Television. John, he arrived at a presentation similar to this I did over at the UN a little while back. John was doing a television documentary for BBC Television. He was the director. And he, at the same time, was writing in parallel a book, which was going to be, he said, the answer to the crop circles. I think he got a different answer to what he thought he was going to get, which I think I just lost. Okay, but this is how it transpired. Doug and Dave, who you've all heard the name, the two senior citizens who claimed to make them, they were just wrapping this documentary up, and Doug looked to Dave in the presence of John, who's going to write this whole thing off now as hoaxing. And Doug said, but you know, Doug and Dave, Doug used to say to me, it's as if we could never answer this. Why are we doing it? Why are we making these? And we said we could never answer this thing. It felt to us like we were being told to make them. Inside their heads, it was like they were being instructed to make them. That could be the most important statement that has been made by people involved with this, because in there broadens out a whole new range of questions. If you can send prayer and healing somebody, which has been proven beyond any question as a group can be done, you can send a similar destructive resonance out to destroy their soul and their fabric. So why could it not be that remote viewers or some consolidated effort, some human, purposeful social experiment be undertaken in the same processes? These are all possibilities, but we're simply left with many pieces of information which makes the consciousness the necessity in further study. I think
Thank you. Yes.
I think I'm there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Colin. That should be another chance for questions, but we have more of this program right now. There'll be a little short statement by Edgar Mitchell, who will be introduced by Jane Janeau, and then we'll have a discussion with Colin and Edgar, and then we'll have some other questions after that. First, from some science students are here. But here's Jane Janeau to introduce the rest of the program.
Well, that's a lot to take in. I don't know about you, but I sort of want to go and absorb some of that. But we're moving on because there's more. And so we're going to have the founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences and the sixth man to walk on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, to come up now and give us a little bit of a sense of what he works with people in different parts of the world and those who are working with in the Hubble telescope and some of the most exciting new information that's coming through. He's going to give you a little taste of that. And then we have an opportunity, because We have, as I mentioned, we have some students here from the Aviation High School, science students, and I'm sure have some questions about what's happening in space, what's happening in inner space, and with consciousness. So it'll be their turn, and the rest of us can listen in and also ask our own questions. But I'd like to hear what the kids are thinking about and wondering about. So, Edgar, can you give us a little informal sense of what's happening here in the latest cutting-edge work that's going on in inner and outer space? Dr. Edgar Mitchell.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jane. Can you hear me with this? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start out speaking to the young people to begin with, because there's some history with all of this that I think is important. And perhaps you, more adult people, will get something out of it also, but I'm sure that the younger people really need some background, because we're talking some rather strange things. Now, I don't have the pretty pictures to put up that Colin used or anything like it, because I didn't know what I was going to be doing here today, except talking to you. So that's what I will do. I like to start out with you young people with a little history. And my beginning history is to point out from my own life that my great-grandparents went across after our Civil War in the 1870s from South Georgia to West Texas to start a new life. And they went in covered wagons, pulled by horses. A few head of cattle to start a new life. Railroads weren't complete across the South and the West. Automobiles had not yet been invented. Light bulbs hadn't been invented. My father was born shortly after the Wright brothers made the first flight. And I went to the moon. Now think about that for a minute. In less than 100 years, from the middle of the 19th century to the middle of the 20th century, we transitioned from covered wagons, horseback, camelback, ostrich back, whatever, to spacecraft and leaving the planet altogether in less than 100 years. Now think about what that means. In all the thousands of years that our history records, we have been on this planet and evolving and doing what we do. Only in the last 150 now, getting to the space age, only in the last 150, for you young folks, have we created the technologies. What that one be? Have we? Okay, thank you. Okay, good enough. Have we created the science and the technologies that have helped us to accomplish the current lifestyles? And that's what I want to speak to a little bit. I'm leading up to what Colin is telling you about and what we have experienced that blows us away. We don't understand. We're just babes in the woods trying to understand some phenomena about the universe that we live in that we don't understand. And I will say, we think we're pretty smart. Our technology has advanced enormously in the last 100 years. And frankly, we're just barely out of the trees. And I feel privileged to have been one of those, the first generation to have left this planet and begun to explore our nearest neighbor, the moon, which is just the beginning. Now let me put this in a larger context too, because all of this is a matter of context. where we've been, what we're experiencing right now, and where we're going tomorrow and in the next few years. That is crucial to all of us, and particularly you young people in this audience. It's your generation that's going to have to pick up the ball and run with it at this point in time. And let me paint the largest picture. Yes, I've been off this planet, and I've had the privilege of looking back at this tiny little speck we call Earth and seeing it as a little speck, and it blows you away. It's magnificent to see this Earth and to see it in the heavens, and I will relate that for you in just a minute. But let's jump way ahead, try to put all of this in context first. When you study some astronomy, or maybe you've already studied some, and you've learned a little bit about solar systems, and a little bit about planetary formations, and a little bit about mainstream stars, because our sun is a mainstream star, and you realize that these mainstream stars have a lifespan of about 10 billion years. And that's what most of these billions of stars that you see out here, called mainstream stars, they go through a particular path of physical development with a lifespan of about 10 to 12 billion years. And our star is about halfway through its billion years. It's 10 billion years. So we've got another 5 billion years or so life on this star. That seems like a long time, but in geologic time, it's not very long. And that we're going to have to be off this planet. So if you want to think about the importance of spaceflight and the importance of ET and what UFOs and what their capabilities are, we're going to have to develop them too. So let's put it in that context that we are evolving on this particular star system in this Milky Way, this galaxy we call the Milky Way. And we have another few billion years left of life on this, and then we have to be out of here. So in our generation, we have begun the process of leaving the planet. I invite you to think back in time. A few thousand years ago, if you've studied your history, the Phoenicians were the first to build ships and start to explore the Mediterranean Sea. And sometime in about that same time frame, South Sea Islanders in their dugout canoes started exploring the vast Pacific. And humans have been walking, we think, from the beginnings in Africa across this planet on foot all before that time, and expanding themselves across this globe. And our previous generation, my parents' generation, developed going into the air. And my generation, our generation, left the planet altogether and started exploring beyond. So exploring, reaching out, understanding is what we're really all about, if we're going to survive. And that's our choice. And the beauty of all of this is that it is our choice. And Colin made some very powerful statements up here about the power of consciousness. Now, you younger people, I'm going to give a little history here so that you understand the context in which we are operating. In the historical setting, our science, as we are developing it and understanding it, only began about 400 years ago in our Western civilization. And it began, fortunately, when the philosopher of that period, Rene Descartes. How many of you young people even know the name? Not very many of you. When the philosopher Rene Descartes, a writer, brilliant man, prince of the church, came to the conclusion that body, mind, physicality, spirituality belong to two different realms of reality. And that got promulgated and accepted by the church, by the Catholic Church. The noble part of that is it got the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, off the backs of the intellectuals of the 16th and 17th century. And they quit burning them at the stake for disagreeing with the church. That allowed science, as we understand it, to start to arise in the 16th and 17th century with Isaac Newton and the early greats. The downside was that science arose strictly as a materialist, reductionist concept. Spirituality, mind, consciousness was not involved at all and has not been involved since those Cartesian days almost 400 years ago. So the science that you learned in school and have until now was built upon the thinking of the last 400 years of strictly materialist concepts. And the beginning of quantum mechanics and the work of Einstein, Bohr, Planck at the end of the 19th, early part of the 20th century set the stage for the development of quantum mechanics in the 1920s, which showed that Descartes was wrong. The Cartesian duality that said body, mind, physicality, spirituality don't interact is just dead wrong. We have demonstrated over and over again, just in the last 10 years or so, 15 years at most, that mind-body does interact. Now that's been known for some time, but throughout the 20th century, from those beginnings, meager beginnings in the 1920s, science, physicists particularly, and biologists have insisted that quantum mechanics only pertained to subatomic matter. It didn't pertain to us. It didn't pertain to our scale size. It didn't pertain to really this reality, only to subatomic matter. Wrong, dead wrong. We have now demonstrated completely and thoroughly, and a part of it was touched upon by Colin here, the fact that the principles of quantum mechanics, called entanglement and resonance and non-locality, pertain to everything in a proper fashion. And most of the phenomenon that we were talking about, and most of the phenomena that have come out of the past in the so-called mystical experiences, are directly related to the quantum world. And our body, mind, and our thinking and our consciousness is fundamentally a quantum process. I will say to you, to help get this idea across, in the English language, we call the intuition our sixth sense. No, this should be called our first sense. Because it's rooted in the quantum world, and the quantum world was around, and the quantum information world was around long before this planet, we, and our solar system even existed. It existed in the very basic nature of matter. Our normal sensory mechanisms, our sight, our sound is as a result of the type of atmosphere we have, and our bodies have evolved to utilize the sound and hear and get information that way. Our vision is based upon the fact that we have solar flux on this planet, and our bodies have adapted, and our brain, mind, body have adapted to utilize that information. And so it goes with touch and all the rest of our sensory mechanisms. And we can demonstrate now very clearly, and I won't go into the technicalities of it, but that all of these senses are based upon a relationship with the quantum world. And so even though at this very moment in time, the great frontier science that needs to be healed and needs to be brought together is the gap and the disagreement and the conflict between Einstein's general relativity and the non-local world of quantum physics. Right now, that is the key scientific issue that needs to be resolved. And we're working on it as hard as we can, but it's a tough one to crack. And we do have people working on it all over the world, and they know it's a problem. And I'm sure it pertains to the very problems that Colin was talking about with the crop circles and the voices and the noises that we don't understand. We don't know how to fit them into it. We don't know how the UFO phenomenon fits into it, but nevertheless, it does. Now, I'm going to shift gears here at this point, having set up the stage for what we're talking about here, and tell you my experience and how I got into the UFO bit. And Colin pointed out he and I and others will be at the Disclosure Conference in Gaithersburg, Maryland, just next week, hoping to open this a bit further. Our U.S. government has been the laggard, the slowest government around to start to open up these very issues. And it's not at all clear at this point exactly where the hang-up is and who's holding it up, but it is still being held up. Now, some of us have suspicions. We think we know a little bit, but we don't know a lot about how to do this. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, which as all of you know from your laughter, has something to do with the UFO bit. And I was a senior in high school, or getting ready to be a senior in high school, in July 1947, when the so-called Roswell incident took place. I didn't think much of it at that time. My people were reasonably successful cattle people, and we had farm machinery dealerships and ranches and farms, and knew everybody in the whole Pecos Valley, with my grandfather being the patriarch of the family and his sons, my father and uncles, managing the businesses. So we knew everybody in the whole area of up and down the Pecos Valley, including some people at what now is Walker Air Force Base, which was the Air Force base associated with the Roswell incident. And Jesse Marcel, the major from the Air Force Base, who was the first officer on site. Well, we also had a friend who was a major in the administration at the same base, who happened to be one of my sources on all of this. Anyhow, I didn't think a lot about that at that point in time. I was too busy being a kid and getting ready to go off to school. And it appeared in the Roswell Daily Record one day, and I still have copies of all of this, that a UFO had crashed, or an alien spacecraft had crashed not too far away. And the next day it came out, the Roswell Daily Record corrected it and said, at least they thought they corrected it, under government requirements to say, no, it was really a balloon, a weather balloon that had crashed. And so one, here today, gone tomorrow, was the story of UFOs. Now, the interesting point, to jump ahead a little bit, over the years, the story of what it was that happened at Roswell has changed at least a dozen times since 1947. Now, if it were anything but a cover-up or what it was, one accurate story would have been sufficient. But in the cover-up stories have been numerous, half a dozen to a dozen in the last 60-some years. And that in itself should be enough evidence that something really went on. Anyhow, I didn't think a lot about that at that point, because I went off to college to get an education, and then to start my life. And I wasn't going to be a farmer. I had hay fever, so I wasn't going to bale hay the rest of my life. So I was headed for a career in industry. But this was during the years of the Korean War. And so the government had a slightly different plan in mind, the draft board. When I graduated from Carnegie in 1951 and went back to work, started to go back to work with my father on the ranch for the time because my grandfather was ill, and Dad had asked me to come back and work with him. And the draft board said, hey, we want you to go to the Korean War. I said, well, you may want that, but I don't. And it so happens I'd started flying when I was 13 years old by washing airplanes on the local flight line, when Dad let me off from punching cattle and putting machinery together. And so I had my pilot's license by the time I was 16. And if I was going to go into the military in the Korean War, I wanted to be a pilot. So instead of being drafted, I enlisted in the Navy, went to boot camp in San Diego, then went off into, then got my commission with the Navy and applied for Navy Flight School, which I received, and went off, became a Navy pilot, and was serving my time in the Navy, paying for my Navy's wings and serving my obligated service. The Korean War was ending by that time, and I was aboard an aircraft carrier in the Pacific, coming home to test pilot duty. I was pretty good at what I did. And so I was assigned to test pilot duty in 1957, coming home from the Pacific. And do you know what happened on October the 4th, 1957? Sputnik went up. And I realized that humans would be right behind robot spacecraft. And I thought, hey, that sounds like a pretty interesting thing. And my natural proclivity as a person asking irreverent questions about what's reality all about, decided that would be a good place to try to find out. So I immediately set my cap toward being an astronaut, although the word had not been invented at that point, because I knew humans would be right there. It was invented in the next few months. But I chose in October of 1957, on the way back from the Pacific aboard a carrier, to change my career path, be a test pilot, get more education, and hopefully be selected into the astronaut program. And that did indeed happen in 1966, almost 9 years later. When I was selected, I was at Edwards Air Force Base as an instructor in the test pilot school, and got the privilege of going through the space portion of the school at that point, and selected into the astronaut program from there. So, but I want to point out, and this is bearing on some of the things we're talking about here. I want you young people to know, that was over 50 years ago, 52 years ago now, that our knowledge of what the universe was all about in the general public at that point in time was about as sophisticated as God in the heavens, man in the middle, and everything else below. We really didn't know doodly squat about what is out there. And we know an awful lot more now, thanks to going into space, particularly thanks to the Hubble telescope, particularly thanks to the magnificent images that are now being brought back over the last 10 years that help us see the universe in ways our ancestors and even our parents, certainly my parents, and even myself as a youngster growing up, had no idea what the universe was really like, from what we are now seeing from these magnificent pictures coming back from Hubble. They blow us away. From the astronomers are just flipping out over it. Those of us with a pretty good education in astronomy and astrophysics are doing the same thing, because the universe is bigger, more complex, more magnificent, more awesome, more problematic, with feedback loops and things that classical science and classical thinking simply cannot explain. And I will say to you that probably one of the sacred cows of our 20th century that thought was explaining the way the universe arose, namely the Big Bang theory of how it all came about, is probably dead wrong. It's not the right one. Fred Hoyle, the British astronomer, was probably correct that we live in a universe that has a continuous creation of matter and is a relatively steady state creation matter type universe. Now that puts a whole new twist on everything we've thought about. Now let's add in the fact that we have visitors, and the visitors clearly, from all the evidence that I have seen and been a part of, are not of this world. Now, to continue my little story that some of you don't know, most of you don't know, when I came back from space and being an astronaut and being pretty well knowledgeable in these areas, oh, by the way, and I did get a doctor's degree from MIT in aeronautics and astronautics back in the days when, as I just said, Our knowledge of space was God in the heavens, man in the middle, and everything else below. But we were probing and trying to learn something. And I did get my PhD from MIT and in aeronautics and astronautics, because at the very beginning of the space program, we did realize, and our government did realize, that we didn't know anything about space, and if we're going to go into it, we better have some people that knew what we knew. And so doctoral programs and graduate programs were set up beginning at MIT, Princeton, and Caltech. Those were the first ones. And I was privileged to be in some of those first classes that went through and got advanced degrees. And that served me well. However, and Fred Hoyle pointed out in that period, when we first went into space, he said, if we ever get a picture of Earth from space, life will never be the same again. And he was right. Because as we've looked back at Earth like this, is this tiny little ball that you can put your thumb up and blot it out. And those of us who have been privileged to have that experience, life hasn't been the same again. And in my particular case, just briefly, since I was lunar module pilot on the third lunar landing, the first landing to do science on the moon. The very first lunar landing was just to prove that we could do it and get back off. That was Apollo 11. Well, that was their mission. Prove we could do it and safely get back. Apollo 12 was to prove we could land precisely where we wanted to land and get back, because Apollo 11 had a little trouble finding a good landing spot. And so that left us. And I was Apollo 14. As you remember, Apollo 13, did you see the movie Apollo 13? Many of you did. Well, Apollo 13 was my original flight. And because I had served on Apollo 10, but with Gordon Cooper, and our policy was, after you served as backup, and that was, you started out, you served as a backup crew for a mission, and then you could go to a prime crew. Well, I served as backup on Apollo 10, which meant I could go and be a prime crew on Apollo 13. And I served backup with Colonel Gordon Cooper, who, by the way, also was one of the first to say that he had had UFO experience while he was in the Air Force, before astronaut experience. Anyhow, he retired from the program after Apollo 10 backup, and I was slated for Apollo 13, and Alan Shepard, who had been our first man in space, who had been grounded because of Meniere's syndrome, but had that corrected, and had come back on flight status, and was assigned to Apollo 13 with me. And this was approved by Houston, but headquarters NASA said, Alan, you've been grounded and not flying for a few years. Perhaps best take a little more time to train. So we switched mission with Jim Lovell and his crew, which was Apollo 14. They took 13, we took 14. We didn't like that, but they got the bad machine, we got a good machine. And we went on to the Apollo 13 landing site. So my mission was then Apollo 13/14. And the good part of that was that I was on the ground with Ken Mattingly, who, those of us who know the Apollo 13 history, got bumped from Apollo 13 at the last minute because he had been exposed to Charlie Duke's measles, or his children's measles, one of the other astronauts. And the medics was afraid he'd come down with measles in flight, so he was his backup had to substitute for him. That left Ken and I on the ground as the lead lunar module and command module pilots in NASA when the Apollo 13 explosion took place. Our job was to be in the simulators working out the problems they had to work out, because the lunar module had to be a lifeboat, a tugboat, to bring them home. That was my machine. That was lunar module pilot. Ken Mattingly had to figure out how to get the command module back into the atmosphere with not enough energy, because the power source had been destroyed by the explosion in space. So our job was crucial then to helping get the Apollo 13 mission home. And then I went on as a lunar module pilot for Apollo 14. But my point I was going to make here, on the way home, after all the work was done, and coming back from the moon, and being able to rotate a bit to keep thermal balance on the spacecraft. We were rotating to keep balance on the spacecraft, which allowed every 2 minutes a 360-degree panorama of Earth, Moon, Sun, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens. Wow. That blows you away. And what happened, and this has happened to all of us in one form or another, I've probably been a little more vocal about it than others, some of the others. And my experience with getting my PhD in astronomy and astrophysics helped enhance my appreciation of it. But from space, when you're in space, the star systems, the heavens, are 10 times as bright, 10 times as many stars as what you can see on Earth on the highest mountain on the clearest night. And that's because of the intervening atmosphere, which looks like a little thin rind around the Earth when you see it from a distance. Here's this magnificent blue and white Earth, and this little rim of atmosphere that keeps away the solar particles and things that allow us to have atmosphere free of these particles that could be devastating to us as living systems. In any event, coming home and being able to look at all of that was overwhelming. It blows you away, and it did me. I suddenly realized from my studies at Harvard and MIT that the molecules of my body and the molecules in the body of the spacecraft and in my partner's bodies were manufactured in some ancient generation of stars, because that's where matter is made, in the furnace of star systems. And suddenly those were my molecules, not intellectually, but viscerally. Wow. A visceral experience of unity with star systems. All is one. The first notion came out of that. And it was so, this continued every time I had a little break from my duties and got to look out the window and see this panorama, such that when I came home, I had to find out what in the world was this experience. I've never had anything like this before. And of course, I found nothing in the, started searching for it, nothing in the science literature and nothing in the religious literature. So I had to go to some professors in a nearby university to help me search it out. But one more point, as I was coming back, I realized that we humans have been asking the question forever, as long as we've been sentient beings, and looking into the heavens and saying, what is this? What is my relationship to all of this? What in the world? Who am I? How did I get here? Where's this all going? And that reoccurred, of course, coming back from the moon. And I realized that as the first generation of spacefarers, perhaps we needed to ask that series of questions all over again, because seeing it from this perspective was a totally, completely new experience. And my friends over at Rice University in Houston, whom I'd asked, helped me understand what this experience was about, came back a few weeks later, and out of the Sanskrit, they said, we found something that may fit. And I said, what is it? They called it Salvakapa Samadhi. What is that? I said, what is that? That's the experience where you see things, and it comes out of the Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit. It's an experience where you see things just like they are separately, but you experience them viscerally as a unity, a oneness internally, accompanied by ecstasy. Now, we have different languages, names for that in different languages. Coming out of Greek, it's a metanoia, change of heart. Satori, out of the Zen, it means a total change in the way you see and experience things. And a blissful acknowledgement, a blissful experience of unity with the universe. That was the nature of the experience. And that also made me realize, back to where we started on this, that one of the places where we in science were totally derelict was that we had promulgated this Cartesian duality for almost 400 years, and for almost 100 years in the 20th century, after the frontier was saying, hey, that's not right. We've got to have something different. And so only now, in the closing years of the 20th century and to the 21st century, have been able to see within quantum science, and a large portion of it is thanks to Noetic, the Noetic Foundation I set up, who's been researching mind, belief system, these types of experiences. And we still don't have a great understanding of consciousness. Because, as Colin pointed out, it is a very complex subject. It starts with awareness. We are aware. In the English language, consciousness at its fundamental level is awareness. But it's much more complex than that. We know that all animals are conscious. We've now had experiments that know that all plants are conscious. We know that all matter to some level is conscious, because one of the first definitions that comes out of quantum mechanics is the idea that two particles that are in process together and subsequently go across the universe from each other, that they maintain quantum correlation. Now, we in science have called that for 80 years now, that one particle, quote unquote, knows what happens to the other particle if you do something to it instantaneously. That is the definition of quantum correlation and entanglement. My contribution here is to say, take away the quotation marks. One particle does know what the other particle is doing. It is the very basis, the most fundamental definition of consciousness that we have. In other words, at the particle level, at the photon level, if they are quantum entangled, there is some information being transferred. And that is one of the flaws that 20th century quantum mechanics said, is that information can't be transferred in this way. So we've devised all sorts of ways to get that information around. But it is very simple. That is the basis of our intuitive experience. That we're entangled with everything in the universe. And our subjective, intuitive experience is the basis of it. And it is entangled with all of our other sensory mechanisms as well. So an entirely new definition of sensing is having to arise out of this basic experience. Now, it's slow going. We haven't converted yet the entire world, or even the world of science. But let me point out to you what we're trying to do. In trying to understand consciousness, at one extreme is the Greek philosophic idea of idealism. It even goes back before the Greeks, but the Greeks formalized it. And this is extreme idealism, which says that consciousness is the only stuff, and matter is simply a thought in universal consciousness. If you want to call that God, that's okay. But that matter is simply a thought in the mind of universal consciousness. Okay, that's one extreme. The other extreme on the other side is scientific materialism that says that consciousness is simply an epiphenomenon of the collision of particles, and we are conscious by accident. Okay, here are the two extremes, and I take the position they're probably both wrong. Somewhere in between, we will find reality as we experience, and that's what science is all about. Test, theorize, test, experiment, and slowly squeeze down your definitions till you don't have anomalies coming out of your theoretical structure. But science progresses by theorizing, testing, and then finding anomalies that says, oops, our theory isn't quite good enough yet. do some more theorizing, test, and we'll keep squeezing it down. But at this point in time, as I said at the beginning of my talk, we are still just barely out of the trees. We think we're pretty smart, and we are in many ways. In this last 100 years, we've done some pretty amazing things. However, let's go a little further. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were just under 2 billion people on this planet. Thanks to the science, and the medical science in particular, of the late 19th and throughout the 20th century and now into the 21st century, the population has exploded from 2 billion people at the beginning of the 20th century to 6.5 billion people at the end of the 20th century. Over a threefold increase. And the best evidence suggests to us that the planet, with all of its magnificent resources, can sustain, with the lifestyles of the industrial societies, only 2 billion people. So we are in deep trouble with sustaining our civilization as we understand it, and something's got to give. And it's up to us to cause it to happen. So, to tie in a little closer to what Colin has been saying, I told you my experience with Roswell. I did take this knowledge that I had learned when I came back from the moon. Many of the old timers, what I called old timers in Roswell, who had been there at the time and involved. They were, some of them in the police force, the sheriff's department, some at the military base, some undertakers, some coffin makers. After I came back from space and was lecturing around and visiting back home, some of them came to me and pulled me aside and told me their story, that they had been shut up after the Roswell incident, and they were now older. They didn't want to take their story to the grave, and they wanted it out. And they figured I was trustworthy since I was a local boy and been to the moon. It would be okay if I took their story. So I promised them I wouldn't tell their names, but I'd carry their story forward. A few years ago, 10 years ago, I did take the story to the Pentagon. I did have a meeting with high-level intelligence people, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I did tell the story with a couple of other, with another naval officer, and Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, if you've heard that name, and told my story of what I knew about the Roswell incident, and subsequently had it confirmed that it was true, and that the individual who I told this with had tried to get into it to find out personally about the information, and he was rejected, as many others have been rejected, to have firsthand knowledge of the cover-up. In any event, however, the fact that the Roswell incident was real has been confirmed. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's primarily what I wanted to tell you, to say to you here today, to say that all of this wonderful stuff that Colin has presented to you today is real stuff. We know it's real. We don't know all of the mechanics that go into how it comes about, whether indeed our alien visitors are causing it, whether it's an interaction in the collective unconscious that's causing it, whether it's a little bit of both, but nevertheless, it is a phenomenon that deserves our attention because it's trying to tell us something. And right now, we need to learn a lot about who we are, where we're going, and what this is all about, because we're not on a sustainable path as a civilization. Now, let me add one more thing. We have demonstrated over and over and over in the laboratory that this consciousness phenomena, whether it be with plants, animals, particles, is a non-local phenomenon. It goes across Faraday cage barriers. Now, those of you with a little electrical engineering or physics engineering, okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of. Thank you very much. We'll take this back.
So now we thought we'd bring Colin and Edgar together to have a little discussion, about consciousness, crop circles, space, the whole thing. And then after we'll take some questions, and then we'll talk to some science students who are here. So, okay, so Colin Andrews again and Edgar Mitchell. I'm sure you have stuff to talk about.
Okay. Was that one work good enough? We'll switch them back and forth. Okay, who's got questions?
Well, do you have a question for Colin? Would you have about his experience in space? I mean,
There would be,
please ask.
okay. Yeah, there would be many, of course, but at the very basic level, I've always kind of been intrigued to wonder, in a normal day in space, and a normal night, I mean, what happens? You kind of turn the lights off and go to sleep? How does that kind of work?
When we were in space, the one person was on duty all the time, on the radio all the time. The other two of us would go to sleep, and we had hammocks underneath our couches. You could go down there. We dimmed the cabin light, but then you had to sleep and go to sleep. So that was just training. Just tired. You're tired, so you could do that.
How many kind of hours would they tax you?
Well, we carved out about 9 hours for sleep and housekeeping and eating and all that sort of thing. The rest of the time we were flying a spacecraft and doing experiments and that sort of thing.
Sure. Thank you.
Of course, a question for you, if it's the one we both really need answers to, is just what is the relationship between the UFO phenomenon, our visitation, and the crop circles, which is something we all really want to know.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is, for me, the hardest one. It's the hardest one to answer. I kind of try constantly to engage my intuitive, that you were referring to it, the first sense, because I think that is important. We all have it. It's what do we feel is happening? What do we think is happening? I can't explain, I can't say that I'm any closer to knowing the physical energies that are involved and how they're deployed. I feel much closer to the fact that it's almost a joint mind at work, that what we need to know and where we need to go is we're being inched along, like they're kind of holding our jackets, We started with a simple circle. Do you see the circle? Do you see now we've got two circles? Do you see we've got a ring around them now? And then we start interactive kind of process. It's like these pulling along. And way down the road, 25 years it took to reach a place where we then begin to question one another. If you made a circle, and I'm the observer, I'm the researcher, and you're telling me you saw this, well, that's funny, that's what I saw. And now both factions are beginning to open up the debate. So it becomes a wider situation.
I was interested that you mentioned some of the manifestations of the UFO phenomenon, like the orbs and things like that. I've worked with, of course, I've worked with healers, and this audience, some of you in this audience may know, I have used natural techniques for prostate cancer and kidney cancer, and successfully with that. And I've also worked with a young healer, and I've been a student of the process. This young healer in Canada by the name of Adam, the healer in Vancouver. He's quite a phenomenon. He's a young man. He's not really in practice right now. He's trying to finish his education. But I have worked with his father, and he has, on many occasions, when his father would go for a walk with him in the evening, the orbs swimming all around him. Now, and I'm convinced what they're dealing with, because we know they can change shape into a lot of other things, and I'm convinced that is a cloaking device, that they have a capability, because in the UFO phenomenon, people have observed these things there, then suddenly take off and suddenly disappear, just disappear. Well, that's a cloaking device. They're changing something that changes the ability to perceive.
Right.
So they look something different.
Right.
And we've got some of that. In the military, we have some of that. We have some cloaking device, but not anything like the aliens have.
It's outside the box.
Yeah.
I would kind of throw this in the equation as well, Edgar, that I was with Stephen Greer, who you will know. one particular evening in southern England, we were out there basically giving him an opportunity to demonstrate that he had claimed on many occasions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to be able to vector into position UFOs, etc. Well, I will say that I was somewhat skeptical, but nonetheless, I was with him and 50 other people. We were on a hillside, and what I witnessed, excuse me, this is this ear problem. We were 50 of us there, and allowing him to kind of basically take the lead on this vectoring business. But what was witnessed was that half of this group, and of which I was one half, and this group over here, kind of intermingled, but of 50, 25 witnessed this red light that cut through the base of the cloud at high speed. It was a cloudy night, low clouds, stratus cloud, and it came through the bottom. It actually illuminated the cloud from within, so we couldn't see structure. We could see that it was roughly oval, coming through at speed, and as it got almost overhead, it separated two ways. Half went this side and half the other. What was particularly interesting to me, and I'm amazed that we've not kind of seen some take up on this, because of the half of the group, my half saw a red light, cherry red, pronounced cherry red, cut in two, anything like that. The other half, who are all right here, I mean, in the same place, as if they're wired differently, saw a bright white light, and it's very, very different, again doing the same thing. So we're looking at the same object. This is whether perceptive, whether we're wired differently, it's hard to know, but it's all in there. It's all in there.
And there is quite a bit of evidence to suggest that that is quite true. The current phenomenon of the indigo children these days are suggesting they're wired a bit differently than we are. And I know a few of those young people, and they're pretty interesting. And there are some that claim, and that there's ETs among us, and maybe so, I don't know, personally know that, but there are some that claim that, and indeed they do have a different perceptual mechanism.
Yeah, I think too, if I may, just to add to that, that kind of bounces off of one another here. There was a slide that I was intending to show the audience, that we had there a clairvoyant, a medium in England by the name of Isabel Kingston, who had claimed, does continue to claim, that she can look at a crop circle and see aura, layers of colors, banding of colors, concentric rings around the circle, within and external to it, in exact relationship to the boundary of the circle. And she will describe this in the widths, in the coloring. Well, we with Masahiro Kahata, who is here, I saw Masahiro come in, is the inventor of the equipment, the IBVA brain measuring equipment. We measured a whole range of individuals, professionals, skeptics, mediums, just open-minded people. And what we found with this medium, Isabel Kingston, why I certainly didn't feel it was the wisest thing to completely discredit her or to ignore her information, was that what we had there, and Masahiro could add to that if he wishes, was that all of from alpha, beta, delta, all of the frequencies being measured, both hemispheres of the brain, in coherence on both sides of the brain, were way above in magnitude, power magnitude, higher magnitude, yeah. I mean, as I say, I do have it in the computer, and I was going to show it. But so there is what I'm really saying, is that we are kind of able to measure at some level something different about some individuals than others, who are giving us different information to others. And so, you know, I think this is very much a time to open this up. It is a matter of opening it up and heading down that road.
I'm going to open it to you guys here in just a minute, but one more point I wanted to make is that there's some studies that I have been doing at this point and continue to deepen, want to deepen, is that there are some of these sensitive people that I'm worked with that claim there are ET frequencies. Now, exactly what they mean by that, I don't know. However, I have been privileged to experience having energy sent to me and feeling a vibration with that. Have you experienced that? Yeah. And it feels like a little motor running inside, like a cat purring or something like that. But they claim that some of this is ET frequencies. Well, I'm devoted to trying to find, okay, using our frequency analyzers, extending them to the point, trying to define some of these frequencies that are claimed to come through this way. And I don't know how we're going to do that yet, but maybe we can do it. We got to do it. Yeah, we got to do it. Okay, it's all yours.
My question, though, to both of you, it seems like there is an evolution to consciousness that's happening to the crop circle phenomena and to the UFO phenomena. Do you feel this is culminating in, let's say, the 2012? Colin just wrote a book called The Idiot's Guide to 2012.
Well, people are trying to link it there. I don't know whether it's true or not.
And so I'm just wondering, are you seeing this reaching a culmination point as we combine consciousness, crop circles, UFOs together?
Well, I think we're probably, as Colin was pointing out, we all perceive things and interpret them a little bit differently. I don't give much credence to 2012, but nevertheless, it is quite clear that things are at a crunch point, that are particularly because of our sustainability, the sustainability issues we're up against. So it better be at a crunch point. We better consider it a crunch point. And as I said, this has got to start from the bottom up, so we better get busy.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I expected this to come up with our discussion. And of course, the 2012 is a very popular subject, and frankly, it needs to be. I was asked with my wife, Cynthia, to co-write for the Complete Idiot's Guide, and I apologize for the title, of course, of which we had nothing to do with it. The Complete Idiot's Guide series, as you know, by Penguin Books. We were asked to write research last year, wrote and published in October of last year, the 2012. So that's the Complete Idiot's Guide to 2012. There's a lot out there about it, and I learned a lot in the research for that book and became totally convinced that the astronomers, the Mayan astronomers, were brilliant. And here's the starting point, and at which it got me latched in very quickly. If you doubt there's anything in the 2012 prophecy, have a look. Page 90 of the book, for whoever's got it. You will see in the sky, in the northern and southern hemisphere of this planet, at 11:11, 21st of December, 2012, a semi-ring of planets across the sky with the white horse above it. Now, they knew something. This is an extraordinary arrangement of planets, which we have not seen before, like for many, 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 many years, beyond our time, and our fathers and fathers before. They knew something. Now, if they knew that, then I want to know more. And so we started. Yeah, that's right. We better know. But just very, very briefly to say that then took us into looking at other trend factors, and the trend factors of population explosion, material requirements of the population, looking at solar flare 24. This is heading in now. That NASA themselves have some concerns at the 100-year quietness of the sun, which might bode very badly for the maximum, which comes at 2012, and other factors which are on the website for anybody who wants to take that further. When you look at all these crossovers of evolution in design, of our involvement and interaction with people, the other factor lines, as Edgar is saying, we on this planet as a species and a culture are in a hurry. We're in a hurry because, like any species, the other species, rats stuck in a cage, you can overpopulate them and immediately they start to behave and do things differently. Their wiring takes on a different form. We are no different. We cannot sustain. 2012, incidentally, also triggers at 7 billion people. You can't do it. We're not going to be able to do it. And that's why we need to be moving on every level right now. And the best way forward is to, for men in particular, I do apologize to the males, of which I am one. We have to, first of all, be able to use and say the word and then to know it and drop the weapons. We've got to know what love is, and we better learn it fast, because love is the answer to our problems, and we've got to move it forward.
Mr. Mitchell, it's a pleasure meeting you. In regards to Roswell.
I can hear you. Go
In
ahead.
regards to Roswell,
Yeah, that's just not a good mic, particularly. Go ahead.
in regards to Roswell.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
The information, what's
Too
the
much.
information that you received from your fellow citizens in Roswell, and what did the government say about that, and why are they hiding it?
Why, what?
Why is the government hiding information about Roswell, and what's your story about what Roswell was?
Well, there's a long history to that may be debatable, but as I understand it, this goes back to that period in time. Remember that we were just coming out of World War II in 1947. The relationship with the Soviet Union the Cold War was just beginning. No one knew with this revelation or discovery of alien presence. No one knew were they hostile or otherwise. There was no real experience there. And the Army Air Corps had been separated from the Army and became the U.S. Air Force. They were suddenly in charge of the skies, and they were just now a new independent agency. They didn't really know who's on first. The OSS, the Office of Special Services, which was the intelligence community of World War II, had been disbanded, and the CIA had not been invented yet or been organized yet. So really no one knew what to do with all of this. President Truman, who was president at the time, then organized a group, and there's a debate about this, but the best story at the moment is this group is called the Military and Joint Intelligence Committee, which consisted of academics, some military people, political people, the best minds he could bring together to take charge of this crash phenomenon and advise what to do with it. And they passed the National Security Act of 1947 that gave the power to do this secretly. And that was the beginning of the secrecy. And it would appear that this group, although they've changed names over the years several times, they haven't abandoned their power, and they've slowly excluded presidents and everybody else from the knowledge. And so those of us that know a little bit about it think it's a travesty. We shouldn't be there, but we are. And that's what the disclosure process is all about. And I have, I've told my story publicly, and all of a sudden last year I told it publicly on a British radio, and the darn thing exploded globally. I've been saying the same thing for 10 years, but I don't know. All of a sudden it was big news. And it seems to have put a lot of emphasis and muscle into this now disclosure effort. And hopefully we're going to get something out of it here very shortly.
Yeah. Dr. Carl Shapley here, and you probably knew my father at Harvard, the cosmologist, the astronomer. And so if you were at MIT in the 50s, he was the one who proved Einstein's relativity to the redshift in the skies, so you may know all of that. But I'm speaking as an ontologist, because he was the cosmologist, and I grew up with astronomy all around me, and as a teenager I dialogued with Einstein on several occasions to say, really, is the E of E equals mc squared, is the E not God? And he would pause, because I asked him this several times, and my own ears were hearing Uncle Albert say, well, except that there may be other universes. And that clicked with me immediately. And I don't think Niels Bohr quite got him together on the fact that the unified field theory is interdimensional. That it was interdimensional. I'm glad to hear you saying these things. Willis Harman and I talked about this several times, once in India. and I miss him very much, and you do, I'm sure, as well. But I'd like you to expand something that you're quoted as having said when you came down in that great moment, and that is that the questions are being asked in the wrong way. You said that the science should recognize the mystical side and that the religions should recognize the evolutionary side. Now, you said it better than I just did here, but I quoted you over India television in quotes like that and got cheers from many, many of the spiritual people out there who realize that science, skiotono, is knowledge beyond the material universe. And I just thank you so much for what you've been doing, and it's a joy to be here with you in the same room today.
Thank you. In response, there is an enormous, as we've been saying all afternoon, there's an enormous amount we don't know, and other dimensions is one of them, and the string theory and M theory seem to be falling apart at this, which went to other dimensions. So all we can say at this point is the future hopefully is going to tell us some answers we don't have at this point. Right. And but we still have the problems that we have of reconciling quantum mechanics and general relativity. They both are great theories and they've worked up to a period, but science is about anomalies and finding ways to put together anomalies and test them out. Sure. And that's where we are at this point. Go ahead. Go ahead, next one.
Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Andrews, I want to thank both of you for spending the afternoon with us. It's been an experience. It's been very. I want to thank both of you for spending the afternoon with us today. It's been intense and intriguing. I have two questions, and maybe Colin, maybe you can provide more insight on my questions to Mr. Mitchell. But one of the questions I have is, do you have any insight as to what caused the alien design and the disk formation in England and the double helix design? And do you believe that the crop formations are harbingers of world change? That's all I'd like to know.
Well, I think inevitably they are harbingers of change, albeit that we are involved in the construction of some of them. Because they are here, my gut feeling tells me it was because they were intended to be. And it's almost like they're to ensure that this was going to happen now on this timeline, they were instilled on us by a mysterious source and instilled upon us by those that construct some. There is an extraordinary duo going on here between that people are doing and those that they are not. I think that they were intended to be here. That was the first thing. So I think they are leading somewhere. With regard to the disk that you are referring to, I don't know how many people will be familiar with that, and Alan raised it on his program too. I hate being the bad guy, but on occasions, if we're going to keep this, let's keep it absolutely truthful, then I have to be the bad guy. I was an advisor to the Mel Gibson movie Signs, which I personally felt was abysmal. If I may, I shouldn't be saying that, should I? But I think they could have done a much better job. They could have been much closer to the very thing that was going on in the fields and the questions that they raised. And of course they cut straight through to the UFO, the ET, and how horrible these things are, and they're going to come and destroy us. It was a wasted opportunity as far as I can see. However, getting back to the disk, meetings that were going on in supplying the movie screen with backdrops to the launch of the movie and other discussions with their PR people, I was told that I guess one can share now were the other side of the movie, which I think was just awful. The whole idea was awful, and I said so at the time, that they were in contact contractually with people that were going to construct specific designs that looked like ETs and disks and things like that, that would help promote the money side of this extraordinary situation we have on our planet, where it's money that talks, it seems. That's the age that we're just coming out of. And to help sell the movie, they were going to mix the manufacture of of design by people and leaving the rest of us basically deceived. And that's what Disney were prepared to do to sell a movie. Sorry, but that I have to be the bad guy to tell you that the one that you're referring to, that had a lot of people spend a lot of time, was made by people in several phases. It wasn't one like many that we could have shown and have shown, covering 10 acres, extraordinary arrangements that appeared in probably 45 minutes. If eyewitnesses are to be believed, probably 15 seconds. I mean, the eyewitnesses that I've interviewed, and I've interviewed many that claim to have seen circles form. And I cannot tell you of one that has described these things forming in more than 15 seconds. That's different from the situation, of course, employing artists over a period of days to construct a design of the kind that clearly interested you. And I'm sorry to give you that answer.
I have a question for Edgar. Regarding one of the statements you made about the relationship between consciousness and matter, which one arises out of which? And so my question to you is, have you looked at the ancient Eastern scriptures, particularly those in Sanskrit, because they were able, that literature was able to answer your, give you insight about your mystical experience? Have you been looking at those scriptures for answers regarding the relationship?
Okay, I should have finished telling the story. What we have discovered, of course, what I went on to do research on, was looking at these types of experiences in all cultures, and they're in every culture. And I'm convinced that this type of experience is in every culture. Its interpretation is culture-based, and we call that interpretation religion. So our cultural religions arose from a transcendental, transformational experience, which is the fundamental thing. But our religions have now become mostly a part of the problem, not a part of the solution, because they've gone off in their own political, economic, whatever direction. And that is why in noetics and in my other research activities, I'm more interested in the cosmological point of view of what is it in nature that allows us to have this flip, this transitional experience out of ego into self-service, into service to the greater good, which I think is necessary if we're going to reach the sustainability we're looking for. We've got to have that as part of our evolutionary path. And the studies now toward how do we help promulgate or promote these types of experiences, and rather than waiting for nature to produce it, when in fact what we're seeing in our culture is ultimate greed and self-service that's collapsing our economic system. So how do we turn this around? That is a real question.
Okay. Is this on?
Go. I can't hear it.
Terrible.
My name is Nancy Burson. Is that it? Is it on?
Have you got a similar situation?
I just wanted to say that I'm very happy to meet you both. I represent the other side, and many of you here have sat in rooms with me.
Just take it short.
Come up and use this one. That's what we're.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. My name is Nancy Burson, and some of you have been sitting in rooms with me over the last 3 years while I show people how to see these light beings that I met in 2004. I began studying with Isabel Kingston in your circles in the year 2000. So I am their ambassador, one of them. I've been, as I say, I have shown people and continue to show people and do events with people so that they can see these really wonderfully loving light beings. And I know that some people, and I just wonder about you guys, because my audiences, when they come to me, they basically say, okay, I'm hearing a few seconds of sound through one ear, particularly the right ear, or I'm seeing little flashes of light. And so we have lots of evidence in that, and there's plenty on my website. But I also just wanted to say to you guys, thank you for being out there in a way it's really wondrous. And I really appreciate that we're all coming together now. And I also wanted to say that a few months ago, actually last summer, I began manifesting from them these little gold pellets. And that was 3 days. And then late December, I started manifesting crystals from my body and other manifestations. And these are being used to create water for people's health. And they're now being studied, thank God, after so much time, because there was a researcher whose name, the extracelestials as we call them, was given to me by them for the purpose of scientific scrutiny. So now they are being studied by the appropriate authorities. I would just say, I'd like to know how many people in here have been seeing little flashes of light, as well as, are you seeing flashes of light? Are you hearing through your ear several seconds? I mean, there's a lot of us here who have that phenomena, and that's them.
Sure, thank you. Maybe we could share email? Okay, thank you. Thank you. I thank you for stepping forward, because it's not always easy. It's not always easy to relay an experience like that and to feel comfortable in so doing. I know for sure there are many people that make contact, I'm sure with you too, Edgar, who have extraordinary experiences and who are able to utilize information in a real direct and purposeful way that is already benefiting us. I think we really are not so far down the road for us all to feel comfortable with that, with this kind of experience and phenomena. Can I just ask very briefly, the first time that you had that experience of manifestation, able to manifest, were you given a kind of formulae or emotional states to be able to do that? Right. Do you see? Right. Do you see here, if we're prepared to think very laterally, the interaction, the two-way that's going on? That's information that's coming through to you who is receptive and able to kind of take it this way. But coming back the other way, there are, like in spoon bending, the Uri Geller effect. Just to very briefly say, I was with I cannot, it's just dropped right out of me, a television program producer. I was trying to pull it back. I was down at a lecture, this is going back some years ago. We were having a discussion in the restaurant. There were other people in there. We were having this discussion, and it was one of those situations, we had this conversation coming to this very place here an hour and a half ago, where, you know, when you really connect with somebody, you almost know what they're about to say. You are absolutely dovetailed in. You're connected right there, frequency and emotionally, on the conversation. Quantum resonance from the expert here. Well, what happened, and this is what I'm saying, it's kind of a two-way conversation. The producer said to me, he's listening to what I'm saying, and you know, it's kind of like, it's unreal, the connectivity that we have going with us. And he then says, but you know, the thing is, Colin, you're a spiritual being. And as he said that, we were eating lunch. I had my Caesar salad. And as he said that, we were in resonance with the point he was making. My spoon started going, my fork went backwards and forwards, like with the lettuce on the end of it. It's going back like this. And I felt the heat in my hand that was holding it. It was like if anybody that was Reiki, that kind of Reiki heat, that healing heat. The metal bent over, it came back just the twice, and it went back down to a position like this, bent over, and solidified. And we just both looked at one another, what just happened? And we said, well, what were we talking about? I said, you just said to me that you are a spiritual being. And boom, the spoon bent, the fork bent. So I think there is a two-way going on here. It's what we've already got inside of us, and something else prompting us, pulling us along. And we should be grateful that it's there and capable of happening.
Well, we won't proceed that. We have some questions from the kids back here. Okay, go.
I wanted to, my friend Josh just wanted to, we were talking about what other evidence of interactions, supposedly with UFOs or any other thing that describes some unusual form of consciousness besides crop circles.
Can you hear what he's saying? We can hear the question.
What other kind of usual kind of UFO things besides crop circles do you see UFO evidence of? That's how. What other?
Well, besides crop circles, I mean, there is quite a number of direct appearances, like the Phoenix Lights appearance a few years ago. Then there was one over Texas just this last year, and the press. Pardon? And the Chicago airport, which these are well recognized, credible witnesses talked about, and there have been those all along the time, all across the last quite a few years. In this recent time, I don't know whether they're appearing more frequently or the media is more willing to let it out. But they've been going on all along, and there are a number of very powerful researchers that, like Ryan and the Woods, Robert and Ryan Woods, and Stan Friedman, a whole host of very good writers that have been researching these phenomena for years. And okay, yeah, here's Science Illustrated. Okay, I don't know, I haven't seen this one. But a lot of very good researchers out there that have got books out that should be read if you're really interested in the subject.
Okay, another question. These are science students from what class are these from, Jane? Okay, special class here for Edgar Mitchell and Colin Andrews. We're going to ask another question.
Shout into it.
Okay. This is a question specifically for Mr. Andrews. I can't specify which part of your presentation, but did you mention that during one of the circles, the chloroform from the trees were removed?
Yes, chlorophyll.
So, I'm sorry, chlorophyll. My mistake. So,
okay.
So what about the plants? I mean, they were just there without the color?
I'm not hearing all of it. I'm hearing the chlorophyll removed.
Explain how. They were just plants there without the chlorophyll?
Yes. Yes. What happened was that two people, researchers known to me, decided of their own volition to construct the two circles you saw on the side, on the slide. They did that. They telephoned me the next day because they felt that in doing this, and the media might pick up on it and have me kind of in front of a camera or something, talking about this design. It wasn't intended to catch anybody out. It was intended to blind test the procedure of plant analysis being carried out here in Michigan. That was the main reason. And then to see basically how other researchers perceived it, what they got out of it. But
so it was a test.
It was a test. It was a test. That's right. But what happened was that the following day, when they told me, I got an aircraft up, and immediately, and it was about 10 hours between the construction and what we found in the field was circular areas that the plants were not swirled, they were not bent to the ground. They had a direct relationship to the position of those that were made by people and had the chlorophyll simply removed from the plant. There was no chlorophyll, hence why they're that color and not green, the chlorophyll of the plant. And in the field right adjacent to that experiment, which is what it turned out to be, minus the chlorophyll, which had nothing to do with them, a huge design appeared so close to them, you would have thought they might have heard something. It's not known, obviously, the exact timing.
They were saying, here, dummy, this is how it's done.
That's simple.
Those contactees and abductee type guys, do you think there's any validity to that?
Any validation to abduction and contactees that are coming out, that happen now? That's a good question.
Well, there are so many different stories coming in the literature that it's hard at this point to decide which ones are real. Now, Professor John Mack at Harvard, who I knew quite well, all he could really attest to was the fact these are sane people telling their stories. These are not nutcases. And of course, he was challenged by the professors at Harvard, and he almost lost his position because of it. But I don't think John tried to speak at all to the validity of what they were saying, but more the fact he was saying, listen to them. They've had an experience. I don't know whether their experience is real, but they've had an experience, and these are not nutcases. And that's all we can really say about it. All I can certainly say about it. And the fact is, Payne Middleton here invited us down to her place, and we had a conference at her place in Carolinas with John and some financial people to talk about how do we go about this in more efficacious ways.
I have a question.
Not at all. I have a section set up for if I had time to share with you, which clearly I did not. I think, in fact, I think perhaps I didn't ought to go further with it. I was about to say something that related to a personal experience. And sorry, I'm just listening to myself saying, maybe this shouldn't be right now. But it's something that down the road I'd like to share with regard to the abduction situation.
So thank you for your presentation today. And Mr. Mitchell, thank you so much for your contribution to the concept of global unity. And that's something that means a lot to me. My organization, We the World, started something called 11 Days of Global Unity. And it's kind of the idea of people coming together in every September around the idea of unity consciousness. I have a very specific question. You mentioned something about feedback phenomena in the universe, and I was wondering what you're referring to. Feedback.
Oh, feedback phenomenon, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was using that as a general term. Classical science is primarily linear science. The equations are all linear. But when you get into the quantum world, you're having to deal in the nonlinear world. You're having to deal with feedback devices. Now, we've experienced feedback right here. You know, the sound is feeding into it. It gives you a buzz. It's been demonstrated over and over now that nature's most important processes are nonlinear. They're very complex processes of nonlinear nature, and with feedback devices in it. I'm not going to speak to individual instances here, but that's where science is going, far more complex, instead of the very simple linear equations we learned in high school and in college characterizing classical physics. Nature is just much more complex than that. So we have to consider our mathematics as modeling, trying to model nature, and we're not terribly good at it yet.
Okay, one more question. Who has the mic there? Who has the mic?
Go ahead.
We were talking about crop circles and everything, and the certain one that you went to, it made noise, right? Is there a possibility that underneath the ground there's something that causes that noise to happen?
Something underneath the ground that causes it.
Sorry, excuse me. It's conceivable. We have, and most people are not aware that we have actually excavated. We've had metal detectors and gone looking for material underground. We have found many human artifacts from the historic record, archaeological goods, but nothing more than that. I think that there's a result that I could share with you quickly, which might also lead to possibly something underground, although that's personally not where I think it is. We're looking at something above, a force that pulls plants down. I don't know of it, other than obviously atmospheric pressure as the effect. But you're looking at something that collapses in an energy field that has the capability of moving plants into position like that. I don't think you're looking at a collapse, which is what you would expect from an underground feature. The reason that I would be interested in going further and looking at underground with regard to magnetism is that in one, and it is only one, remember we've looked at about 10,500, in one, on Ministry of Defence land as it happens, we had a Celtic cross appear where the Earth's magnetic field, the norm, was being exceeded by about 300% and mimicking the actual design. In other words, the 300%, the increase in the 300% of the Earth's normal magnetic field mimicked the actual pattern of the design itself. Dr. John Alburn was doing the analysis of that, and in fact was going to also possibly be here today. So in looking at that and measuring, being able to measure the effect of the distribution of the magnetic field, we would be looking at a source of about 20 feet underground capable of doing that and being able to calculate the level of magnetism, or something invisible, creating it 20 feet above ground. So again, there is only a question, and it is which. Well, we were not there when it was created. We have no idea whether it was a mechanism deliberately executed from above or something that's being manipulated, perhaps underground. So that's as much as I can say about that.
I think that's all we have time for, but this is the anniversary, 20th anniversary of FIONS. What's the matter? Okay. Oh, well, it's just, you okay with one more question? Okay, one more question.
In regards to the Roswell incident, is it true that the government adopted the alien technology to create stuff like the bulletproof vest, the fiber optics, the microchip?
So do we have proof that alien technologies developed our own technology? Yeah, we have proof that alien technology has been put into bulletproof vests, lasers, and stuff like reverse engineering of craft.
Well, no, there's some false claims on that. In the Corso book, if that's what you're referring to, Day After Roswell, I believe, Phil Corso, it was attributed to him, claimed that much of our modern technology came from alien. There's others that would dispute that really wasn't the case, that we were developing it right here. Now, there may be some, at this point, alien technology that has been learned and has been developed, but that's a part of the special access program world that we don't really can't talk about. Yeah.
It's just to add that anybody who is interested in pursuing this new series of basically presentations is kind of a reboot of the research. The entire archives of the last 26 years of my own research will be made available through PDF down files as of tomorrow morning on colinandrews.net. And that is not a plug because I'm sure, as always, there will be very little money in it, but colinandrews.net is where you have access in the coming weeks and months to all of the data.
Yeah, and Colin and Edgar will be at the Exopolitics Conference next week. Look up Paradigm Research Group next weekend in Washington. And there's also CDs of today's event in the back. And the president of FIONS here had a comment to make, because this is our party and we're having a party downstairs.
So thank you all very much, and I would like to thank our very, very special presenters. Thank you.